All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third webinar in our Working with the Techspert series, built-in accessibility features, focusing on narrator, VoiceOver, TalkBack, Chromevox, and some built-in magnification features as well. Our presenter today and has been and will be for the rest of the day is Dr. Rachel Sesler-Trinkowski. I'll let her talk a little bit more about her experience and certifications. Can't hear you, Rachel.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. I forget about that external mute button, which is great, but not when I forget to unmute it. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rachel Sesler-Trinkowski, and I am a certified rehabilitation counselor as well as CADIS, Certified Assistive Technology Instructional Specialist. I see many of you were on previous sessions, so I won't go too deep into myself, but I do work, I'm the AT program coordinator for UMass Boston, and I also oversee our technology and vocational services at the Lighthouse for the Blind in Palm Beach here in Florida. So welcome everyone this session. Hopefully you're in the right place. It's built-in accessibility features. So we're going to do an overview, as Andrea said, of the built-in accessibility features. I'm going to briefly talk about some of the third-party options just to compare as far as just so you're aware of those options. And I have links throughout the presentation like in the previous, the PDF is available on the website, so you have access to that to download it if you want to follow along. And I'm happy to discuss any questions. We'll probably save most of the questions toward the end, but Andrea will interrupt me if there's anything that she feels is pertinent as we go. And with that, a little bit about FIMC-VI.
So most of you, like Rachel said, you've been on our previous webinars, you know who we are. We are a statewide resource center funded by the Florida Department of Education, and we are considered a B's discretionary project. That's the Bureau of Exceptional Education Student Services. We provide Braille and large print and digital books to students who are registered with us pre-K through 12th grade. And we also are the ex officio trustee for American Printing House for the Blind. We provide professional development, which you all are participating in today. We also have a variety of student and family events. Florida Regional Braille Challenge, we host 4 of those. Florida Cane Quest and Florida Festival of Families. We also are heavily involved in ensuring that the Florida standardized assessments are accessible to Braille readers. And we also help coordinate volunteer Braille services for school districts through Visual Aid Volunteers of Florida. If you have any questions about our services, our contact information is at the end. If you want to contribute to the conversation, please use the chat box. It is open. We love all the communication that's been happening through the chat box in the previous sessions, so please continue to use it. Make sure, though, you are typing to all panelists and attendees. If you're just typing to the panelists, it's just us. But if you want everyone to see your questions and comments, please select all panelists and attendees. When we're ready for Q&A, please feel free to use the raise your hand feature by pressing the icon, or you can use the shortcut key Alt-Y, and we'll give your microphone permission.
And just a reminder that we do have a captioner online. Thank you so much. I think it's Francisco, but thank you for the captioning. So that is available, and you could access that through the Zoom toolbar.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel.
And I know you shared the survey link for tomorrow. So if there's questions that are kind of open-ended or not related to this session, please go ahead and submit your questions. The next section, the virtual water cooler, is open-ended. So we're hoping that we could address some of your questions that don't necessarily pertain to any of the sessions that we have scheduled.
And I'll be posting that link to submit your questions ahead of time periodically in the chat box. So go ahead and you can submit your questions there. For handouts, they are available on our website, fimcvi.org/training/webinars. And for CEUs, you guys will receive, there's the survey link here, and then there's one at the end, and I'll also send one via follow-up email. In-service credit is provided by the Florida Instructional Materials Center for the Visually Impaired, so if you have any questions, contact me, Andrea. All right, take it away, Rachel.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. So we're really We're not going to go very deep into any of the specific options, but I do want to. We're going to pretty much gloss over just so you're aware of how to at least turn these features on and off and what's available on the different operating systems. And there's an opening code. Yes, thank you.
I glossed over it. All right, the opening code is TalkBack. TalkBack, one word. I will type it in the chat box.
Okay, TalkBack, opening word, TalkBack. So third-party screen magnification software, but before I mentioned to you earlier, I'm just going to at least discuss some of the common third-party screen magnification software. And when it comes to third-party screen magnification software, at least at this point in time, we're talking mostly about Windows. So of course, Zoom Text, which many of you have heard of and use, iZoom, and it's a lowercase I with the capital word Zoom. Magic, which at this point is still around and available. Both Magic and Zoom Text are available through Vispero. Another option through Dolphin is Supernova Magnifier. That's not used as much in the States, but it's also an excellent third-party screen magnification program. There was a question, I think, about CUs. I'm gonna minimize that so I'm not looking at it. And of course, there's many others. So now the built-in screen magnification software. So for Mac OS computers, we have Zoom. It's built in, it's free, works very well. For Windows, we have the built-in Windows magnifier features, and both Mac and Windows have additional features, so not just magnification. Windows actually has some impressive updates to some of their accessibility settings that they've made, where you actually could change the color of the mouse, and you could do some pretty advanced things that really weren't possible in the past unless you had something like Zoom Text or Magic or Supernova. But you have a lot of flexibility. So beyond just the basic magnifier and Zoom on Mac and Windows, you have additional features. Sometimes just adjusting the fonts, the size, the colors is also important. So don't forget about those features. And some features aren't necessarily accessibility features, but they could certainly be used that way. For Chromebooks, you have the screen magnifier. So that's a built-in screen magnifier that's free and accessible on any Chromebook. And Chromebook, really Chrome OS. So if you have a Chrome box, it would be accessible on a Chrome box or a Chromebook that's running Chrome operating system. For Android and iOS features, we have built-in magnification features as well. For iOS, you're using Zoom, and Android, it really will depend on, usually it's called Magnifier or some version of that, but with Android, because it's open-ended, sometimes the version and where you find the settings may vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, and also from carrier to carrier, sometimes they adjust how things are presented in their operating system. And there's others. So of course, if you're running a Linux distro or some other operating system, most modern operating systems, even beyond the ones that I mentioned, have some magnification or other accessibility features. I have links throughout this. I'm not going to open those, but please feel free to use this as a guide to come back depending on what operating system you or your students are using, so that you have access. I do have some of the what I feel are the most essential commands for using some of these features. With the magnification features, there's usually not a whole lot to it, especially with the built-in options. But then of course, don't forget to go beyond that and look to see what other accessibility features you have for colors or mouse or cursor changes. So there's a tutorial here for Magnifier on Windows. And the link is called Microsoft Windows Use Magnifier to see items on the screen. For Windows, let's see if it works while I have the slideshow presenting. So if I do a Windows Plus, I'm just zooming in there. Andrea, are you able to see that effect with Zoom?
No.
Yeah, that's one of the downfalls of using any remote software is most remote programs. I'm not going to get into remote teaching here too deeply, but feel free to ask me questions in the virtual cooler session if you have questions about that. But one of the drawbacks is you can't typically see the effects of magnification. Now, what you probably saw is my little screen that says Magnifier, and right now it's at 100%. So I am seeing right now, so it's at 170%. So I am at 1.7 times magnification, and then I could turn that off. So you're able to basically just do windows with plus and windows with minus to zoom in and out. I didn't have to enable anything. It's already enabled by default unless you go into settings and disable it. And you can do Windows Escape to exit, which is what I did. For those of you who were on the session for basic keyboard commands, remember when you do keyboard commands, you have to be conscious of the modifier keys. So since Windows is the modifier key, I hold that down and then I tap plus once at a time to make it bigger, or I hold down Windows and tap minus to make it smaller. For Windows Escape, I hold Windows and I tap Escape to exit the magnifier. Windows with U will just quickly get me to my accessibility settings. And in this case, it took me to display. I have options to make everything bigger. I'm not going to go through everything here, but if I scroll down, I could go to additional display settings, background settings, color settings, theme settings. Over on the left, I see options for cursor and pointer. Color filters. So if you have students who have difficulty with certain colors, or if they have color deficiency, there's some amazing options under color filters, and of course looking at high contrast. So you're able to just do Windows U and you'll quickly get to this screen, and you could explore all of these settings with your student to see what will work best for them. And one note, just in case any of you have used this so it's out of my way. There you go. One thing is with Windows U used to start narrator on older versions of Windows. That doesn't start narrator now. It just takes you basically to those accessibility settings and display where you could quickly access those under settings. The command to start and stop narrator as of the latest version of Windows 10 is Control, Windows, and Enter. So if I were to do that now, I may not. Andrea, tell me if you hear that. I may have to stop share and start it over if I didn't check that box.
It sounds very faint. I don't think it's coming through.
Yeah. All right. Let me fix that real quick. I'm just going to quickly stop my share and I will bring it right back up. I think when I shared, so which is a useful feature, when you're sharing in Zoom, there's a checkbox that I could tap to. I am going to click on it. So when I share my screen, if I want to share my computer sound, you want to make sure that that checkbox is checked. So if I do Control Windows Enter.
Start narrator dialog.
I'm just going to start narrator, and it takes me right to a place. Now I could check the box that says don't show again. So if you have a student that's very comfortable with this, you don't necessarily need that, but this gives just a quick message with some tips on getting into the input learning mode using caps lock 1 and caps 1 to turn it off. That's very similar to JAWS and NVDA to turn on the input mode or keyboard help mode. So if you do commands, it will tell you what they do. So very similar with narrator. They've tried to mimic some of the commands, so it's not as difficult to transition from one screen reader to another. So if you're using narrator, NVDA, JAWS, I don't really think there's much of a transition or training, but there are some differences. Of course, adjusting the settings will be different within those 3 different screen readers. So I'm going to hit escape to exit that.
Narrator heading.
Now it does take me to a screen where I have a narrator guide, a quick start. So I could come in here. So if you have a student or if you yourself are learning how to use narrator, you could go through the quick start. There's a narrator guide, what's new, settings, and there's a checkbox where I have set right now where this will show every time. So once you or your student or both are familiar with narrator and you don't need the screen to come up, I could uncheck that box. I'm going to just Alt F4 here.
Exiting narrator.
But you have access right there to the complete tutorial and guide. So screen magnification for Chrome operating system. I don't have my Chrome connected right now, but again, it's going to be very similar. I do have a link here for information where you could learn more about zooming in or magnifying on your Chromebook screen. The same command, if you were using Chrome, I'm talking about Chrome operating system, but the Chrome browser, it would be the same command if you were using the Chrome browser on a Windows computer or on a Chrome operating system. And it's just Control plus or Control minus will zoom in or out. Let's see if I have a screen up here with from AFB. So if I do a Control plus and a Control minus, now I know visually that would be visible to you because that's not the screen magnification. That's actually magnifying within the Chrome browser. And all I'm doing is Control plus, Control minus. Some of you probably use this already. If I had a touchpad, which I do, I could also just zoom in or out on that. But if you do Control plus and Control minus, it will keep it more uniform. So if it's an accessible website like this one, it's going to line up, and it won't have to have a scroll bar at the bottom. If you get to a page where you have a scroll bar at the bottom, it's probably not optimized for accessibility and universal design. When you have a web page like this where you're zooming in, I would think I was up to close to about 1.75. When I'm zooming in that high and it's lining up, I know that they've definitely put some thought into making their website accessible. So again, Chrome, now that's not the screen magnifier, and that will work on Windows as well, but it's just one way that you can increase magnification. I wouldn't typically think of resolution as an accessibility feature, but on Chrome, because it's so simple to do with a keyboard command, it made me rethink, resolution as an accessibility feature. And of course, you could adjust the resolution on Windows or Mac or other operating systems too, just to have the overall screen or the text and the images on the screen be a better size for you or your student. So on Chrome operating system, Control Shift with plus and Control Shift with minus actually will just change the resolution. So you're not really, I have the word zoom in and zoom out, but I want to clarify, it's not really a magnification feature. You're actually changing the resolution of the display. So Control Shift plus, Control Shift minus does that. And then they do have their own built-in free screen magnifier that comes on Chrome operating system. And to adjust, now you do have to enable it. You have to make sure that it's enabled first under accessibility settings. And once it's enabled, you would do a Control Alt with brightness up or brightness down. And on a Chromebook or a Chrome, if you have a Chrome keyboard, it would be F6 or F7. Some people are using a Windows keyboard with a Chrome computer. So if you had a Windows computer, it would be Control Alt F6 or F7. They're in the same position as those brightness keys. Andrea, if there's any questions that you feel you need to interrupt me for, just let me know.
Will, we're good right now. Thank you.
Right. Zoom on a Mac. So the zoom feature on really all Apple products, the screen magnifier that's built into their platforms is called Zoom, but there's different options on a Mac OS compared to some of their iOS devices. So I have a link here for Mac accessibility shortcuts. So you might want to explore that to learn more about using Zoom on a Mac. Some very basic commands are Option Command with plus or minus. Now it's different keys because on Mac I don't have the Windows key. Technically, the Option key is technically the same as the Alt key. So Alt Option, even on some Mac keyboards you'll see it say Option Alt on the same key. So Option Command, the pattern is very similar, right? We're still using the plus and minus key. So Option Command plus to make it bigger and zoom in, and then Option Command minus to zoom out. You could also do Option Command with the number 8, not F8, but the number 8 to turn zoom on or off. And if your Option Command with plus doesn't work right away, it may be disabled, so you may need to go under your settings to enable that. You also have, and again, these are just some very basic commands. There's much more beyond these commands, and you could also adjust all of these settings within the accessibility preferences. But you can toggle the color inversion on or off using Control, Option, Command, and the number 8. So again, we're just, instead of just Option Command 8 to turn zoom on or off, we're adding Control. So Control, Option, Command, and the number 8. So some of the, I would say, finger acrobatics when you're, for some of these commands, especially if they're using multiple keys, you want to make sure that you or your students, are very comfortable with touch typing, so they're not having to hunt for these keys. When they're learning keyboard commands, they should already be very comfortable with the keyboard, so they're not, you know, they're not so taxed trying to figure out where the key is, and they could just focus on learning the command and understanding what it does.
Hi, Rachel. Before you move on, there was a question from Megan. Is there a color inversion for Windows?
Yes, there is. I don't know that hotkey offhand. Someone in the chat is gonna probably type it before I could look it up. There is a command. I don't know it off the top of my head. But with Windows, we have Windows is really, I'm gonna go back to that Windows U screen for 1 second. It's way beyond just color inversion. If I go under color filters, you can see I have a dark setting enabled right now. Here's allow the shortcut to toggle the filter on or off. So these are actually for color filters for, like I said, for people with color deficiency. And then I could come under high contrast. I could turn high contrast. Oh, hopefully I didn't lose you there. You still there, Andrea?
You're good. And yeah. the shortcut key,
it's gonna take a minute.
The shortcut key is Alt Shift Print Screen.
Yeah, it's gonna take a second to revert back. I forget it. We'll be back. There we go. Okay, you can do it. Just takes a second to refresh. Don't have to reboot, but when you turn that high contrast feature on, it does take a minute to adjust settings. Say that again, that hotkey.
Oh, Alt Shift Print Screen.
Yes. Okay.
And then somebody else said Control Alt. I think that's either L or I.
Yeah. You know, while I'm in here, this was something that just impressed me. So I have my mouse, large yellow mouse. So there's some different colors. I could also pick a custom pointer color if I don't want to use one that they've provided. But these are some of the newer features in one of the newer versions of Windows that's come out. I could also adjust the size, and this is not Zoom Text, this or any other third party. This is just Windows features. So I definitely recommend exploring those.
Then one more question. Which Zoom would you use for Google Classroom? Depends on Windows or Chrome, or will it work with Windows commands?
So with Classroom, it depends on what operating system you're working on. If you're on a Windows computer, then you could either use the built-in Windows Magnifier. You could also magnify if you're using the Chrome browser. I would recommend Chrome browser if you're using Google Classroom. You probably could get it working with Firefox or Edge, but for Google Classroom, my suggestion would be to use Chrome. I think it would be optimized if you're using the Chrome browser. So then you could use Control+ and Control-. Just know that that's only magnifying the content on the web page that they're focused on, and not the toolbar, not the ribbon. So it really depends on the student's needs, but you could use these features together. If you were on a Chromebook, then again, you could adjust the resolution, you could adjust the magnification within the browser itself, and you're going to be on a Chrome browser within a Chromebook or Chrome operating system. And then you could use the screen magnifier. You could use all three together, or you could just adjust settings, you know, based on need.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the answer is it really depends, but you have the flexibility to play. And for one application, they may just want to magnify within the Chrome browser, but for other tasks, they may need everything magnified. So they may want to use the built-in screen magnifier, or both together. It really depends on what they're trying to accomplish and what works best. If someone's needing to go, you know, beyond 4 to 6 times magnification on a regular basis, or if they're struggling to see due to extreme light sensitivity, or for whatever reason they can't look at the screen for more than 10 minutes without getting a headache or eye strain, you're probably going to want to either combine some kind of screen reader with it, or perhaps consider whether screen reading is going to be a better solution for that student. So there's no box where I could say if they need this level of magnification, you have to switch to a screen reader. But in my experience, about 4 to 6 times magnification, and that's not assuming, that's completely aside from any other eye strain or headaches or other issues that they may have. So let's say 4 to 6, they're not having headaches, they're just needing 4 to 6 on a regular basis to be able to read text and do their tasks on a computer. That's typically the point where I see people reaching their frustration level. But you have to take in other considerations. If they're straining, if they can't look at that computer for more than, I mean, even 10 minutes, a half hour, and they're needing to be on that system for 6 to 8 hours a day, they're just going to be miserable. And that's the last thing that we would want. So you want to try, even if it takes longer for them to learn a screen reader, which it will, ideally, once they have that skill, they're going to be better off using a screen reader than the magnification. And perhaps they'll use some of that together. And fortunately, we can do that. So you just have to take those things into account. Any other questions before we move on?
No, but thank you for mentioning those points. Very important.
Yeah. Okay. So let's switch to screen reading software for Windows. And I don't have Fusion on here, but of course Fusion or Dolphin has options where you can combine screen reader or screen magnification. Just one thing I want to say, and they're great options. If you have someone that truly needs to use a screen reader, what I find is they really have to be committed and to learning the commands and learning the keyboard commands or whatever other input if they're using Braille keyboard, Braille commands. Because otherwise, if they use the mouse, even if it's straining and if they're struggling using it, it's very difficult for them to learn the keyboard commands. So one thing, and I know I've probably said this in previous sessions, but as students are learning keyboard commands, if they're already a mouse user or touch screen user, just gradually have them ask themselves and quiz themselves every time they reach for the mouse or the touch screen or whatever that visual input is. Do I know how to do this without using the mouse or the touch screen? And if the answer is yes, do the command. If they're still learning, they're going to need to use a combination until they really have those skills down. So for screen reading software, just briefly want to talk about the third-party options. Of course, JAWS. Most of you, I think probably everyone on this call knows what JAWS is, Job Access with Speech, from Vispero now. NVDA, which is free, excellent. I believe it's the top screen reader that I'd have to go back and verify if I'm correct on that, but I believe one of the surveys that came out recently, I think the majority of people using screen readers are using NVDA. And it's not a surprise. It's an excellent screen reader. They have a great team working on this, and you know, it doesn't have all of the bells and whistles that JAWS has. In some cases, you know, certain screen readers will work better with some applications than others, but it really just depends on the task. But for most tasks, you know, reading email, navigating the web, word processing, you know, whatever screen reader the student's using, even narrator at this point, or VoiceOver on a Mac computer is going to do the job. And NVDA stands for non-visual desktop access. System access is another option that's third-party from Ceratech, a great accessibility company. And I have links for all of these if you want to learn more. Of course, Dolphin Screen Reader, which is a third-party option from Dolphin. And they also, like I said, have a combination of their screen reader and screen magnifier that's similar to Fusion. One of the differences is their combination doesn't run two programs side by side. So it's one single program. You don't have to have Zoom Text and JAWS running side by side. With the Dolphin screen reader, screen magnifier, it's one application running. So, you know, I see that as one slight benefit to using their platform. I know most people in the States, especially here in Florida, tend to go with Vispero, but don't rule out looking at other options. There's excellent options out there. Narrator, I showed you a little bit of that's the built-in option for Windows. In the past, I would have told you, you know, in a pinch, turn narrator on just to turn the computer off if nothing else is working. That's not the case anymore. Narrator is quite functional. You can navigate the web. You really could do, you could use your computer pretty well with just narrator by itself. So it's an excellent option. And if you have students who are already familiar with either JAWS or NVDA, it wouldn't take them long to just learn some basics of narrator if they did need to switch. If for some reason their primary screen reader wasn't working, it's really important to have a backup. And there's others. There's so many others, but those are going to be the major screen readers on the market. Windows narrator keyboard commands. I mentioned control with Windows and enter. That turns it on or off. Now I did a few other commands earlier, but control Windows enter, if I did it, turns it on.
Narrator.
If I did it again, it just turned it off.
Exiting narrator.
Also, this is really an older command, but caps lock escape will also exit narrator. And remember, when you're using your screen readers, often caps lock or insert are going to be those special keys. Also for Magic or Zoom Text, usually they use either caps lock or insert as their special keys for the commands within that application. You could also go to the Quick Start Guide, which I showed you, and control with Windows and the letter N opens up the narrator settings. So if I did control Windows and N, I'm just going to quickly, I don't have narrator on right now, but it just opened up my narrator settings. So I would be able to go down and explore those and adjust the settings. So screen reader software for other operating systems, that covered Windows. And by the way, the third party, in the past, there were a few options for Mac. I don't really know of any. I'm thinking maybe Linux. I guess Orca technically would be third party, but there's really not too many third party screen readers that I could think of for the other operating systems. Android's a little different. They have some menu driven options, but not specifically a screen reader by itself that I could think of. One of the difference with Android is because it's open source, we have the built-in screen reader TalkBack is sometimes called something different on some of the operating systems. So VoiceOver would be for all Apple products, free, built-in, and I have a link there to learn more about VoiceOver. TalkBack for Android, again, it's going to be called something a little different. On Android, they call it Voice Assistant, which is a little confusing because we talked about voice assistants yesterday in a completely different way. So I wish they would have picked something else only for that reason, because it's just a little confusing, I think, when you're saying voice assistant as a screen reader, but their screen reader is called Voice Assistant. It's Voice View for Kindle devices, but it's really based on TalkBack. Chromevox would be the built-in screen reader for Chromebook. That's built in, works well. Chromebook, we're gonna probably be hearing more about that soon, but Chromevox is an excellent screen reader, works well. And with all of these that I'm mentioning, we could also connect refreshable Braille, either using Bluetooth with, we don't have USB for some of the smart devices, but for a Chromebook that has a USB, you could connect refreshable Braille using USB or Bluetooth. And Orca would be the free screen reader for GNOME and Linux-based operating systems or distros. For Mac, I'm seeing questions.
Before you move on to Mac,
yeah, go ahead.
Somebody asked, would you use narrator as a backup and not a primary?
I think at this point, I don't have anyone using narrator as their primary right now that I'm working with, but that could change pretty quickly. There's still some things that I like about NVDA that work really well. So if someone can't afford it, I would still install NVDA. It's free and they have access to it. So I haven't had anyone use narrator as a primary, but I think at this point it absolutely could. So if you don't, especially now, if you have a student who doesn't have access to a screen reader and they have a computer at home and there's no way to get to them to install software, although you can remote in, but if you don't have that admin rights, then you could absolutely just get them started with narrator. Any other questions?
We're good to go.
Give me 1 second.
I really love everybody talking in the chat box. Good discussion happening. Excellent. Yes, definitely a good question. That's okay. Which system do you think is more simple, Guide or Chrome, when you're ready?
Dolphin, Guide, or Chrome?
Yes.
Okay, remind me to talk about that at the end, because they're two very different things.
Okie dokie.
And I have Guide Connect in here, so when I get to that, I'll explain. But Chrome could either be a browser or an operating system, and Guide Connect is a menu-driven program, so they're completely different. Mac modifier keys. So yesterday we talked about the modifier keys for Windows, and it's important to know those. So when you're doing keyboard commands, you know which keys to hold down. Again, think about using Shift. When you're doing capital letters, you hold down Shift, probably without thinking about it, and you type the letters. So when you're using other commands, you want to know which the modifier keys are. For Mac modifier keys, it's going to be Command, Control, Option, which is also the same as Alt, Shift, and the FN key. Now, if you have an FN key, that's basically you would hold that down to lock the function keys. Or sometimes there's a duplicate key on laptops where you would hold down function and hit another key to activate a command. And of course, I'm going to start losing my voice. Caps lock would also be a modifier key on Mac if you set it as the VoiceOver key. It is possible to do that. So rather than use Control Option, which would be your two VoiceOver keys by default on Mac, you can set the caps lock key as the VoiceOver key. Mac with VoiceOver, just some basics. So to start Mac on a Mac OS computer, not iOS, the command to start it would be Command with F5, and that enables or disables. So it's a toggle, just like Control Windows Enter turned narrator on or off. Command with F5 turns VoiceOver on or off on a Mac. VoiceOver F8 will open up the VoiceOver utility, and that's where you could adjust all of the Mac settings. Control, that's an important key. I would say there's one program, it's not a built-in option, but there's one program where Control does not need the speech, and I'll mention that at the end. But all of the programs I'm talking about, even the magnifiers like Magic and Zoom Text, if you're using the speech with those programs, Control is your pause key. So that's a very important key. And I'll talk a little more about that later. Doesn't turn the speech off. It just temporarily pauses whatever it was saying. Control and Option are the VoiceOver key together. If you see in documentation online, often they'll put it as VO, and that's just shortcut abbreviation for VoiceOver. So if you see VO plus, I don't know, VO plus D, right? That would be the command to get to the dock. That would mean hold down the VoiceOver key or keys, in this case, Control Option, and tap the letter D. If we set VoiceOver to caps lock, then it would be caps lock D. VoiceOver with right or left just moves next or previous. If you have a Bluetooth keyboard connected to an iOS device, that also works. It's the same as a flick right or a flick left. So if you were flicking left or flicking right on an iOS device or on a Mac computer, VoiceOver right or left would move to the next or previous item. And Chrome, just a little tip, I'll mention that later, but it would be your Chromebox key with right or left. So very similar structure to their commands, which is why if you understand how to use a screen reader on one operating system, even though, yeah, there's different terminology and it's structured a little different, but if you understand a screen reader on one operating system, it makes it much easier, I feel, to learn it on another operating system. VoiceOver with up or down will move line by line, or if you're in a menu, and that would be very similar in a Chrome, so it would be Chromebox up or down. So just a few commands. You know, I feel if you understand, like we talked about yesterday with Windows, if you understand how to get around the operating system and do commands, you could really get to most of the important areas. You could start applications. So to get to the dock on a Mac, it would be VoiceOver with D. So again, it depends what you have your VoiceOver set to, but usually Control Option with the letter D. And then once you get to the dock, you could do usually either right or left by itself, but you could also do VoiceOver right and VoiceOver left to go between all the items on that dock. VoiceOver with Shift and D, so very similar command, we're just adding Shift to it. We'll get to the desktop. So if you have anything on the desktop, any icons, then you could quickly get to those. VoiceOver with M will get to the menu bar at the top of the screen. The menu bar is the screen that goes across the top that has the apple in the top left. That would just be VoiceOver M. And to get over to context menu. So if you needed to open, if you were focused on an item and you wanted to open a context sensitive menu, it's VoiceOver with Shift and M. So there is a pattern to these commands. And Control with F8 will open up the system menu. Actually, you could also do VoiceOver with M twice. So you just hold down Control Option and tap M twice, and it'll jump over to that system menu, which is in the top right where the time is. Command with space, this is one of my favorite commands. That will get to the spotlight search, and from there you could look, you could type in like when we go to the Windows, if I hit the Windows key and start typing, I could search. Oops, let me get that back. But if I go to the Windows key, where I was. If I go to the Windows key on a Windows, which I won't do again, but and I start typing, I could look for apps, I could look for documents, I could look for folders, I could even type a web address and go to a web address. So same thing from the spotlight search. If I do Command space on a Mac, I could type in to search my entire Mac computer. And then VoiceOver with K is that keyboard help. So very similar to what we talked about with Caps Lock 1 with narrator, or Insert 1 if I was using NVDA or JAWS. It really depends on which key I have set to my screen reader key, but that turns on that input or keyboard help mode. And on a Mac, it would be VoiceOver K. So that's a very useful feature because a student can just use that to get familiar. They could press commands and hear if they're hitting the right keys. And often it will also tell them what the command does on some of these, with some of these different screen readers. VoiceOver Command F8 will open up that VoiceOver utility too. Was there a question, Andrea?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. So VoiceOver commands and gestures, I have a link here. We're not going to go deep into that, but to learn more about the commands, I have the Appendix A commands and gestures for VoiceOver on a Mac. Please explore if you're working with a Mac yourself or your students. Chrome OS modifier keys, again, very similar: Shift, Control, Alt. Don't have a Windows key. Search would be your ChromeVox key. So ChromeVox is the screen reader on Chrome operating systems. So if we're using ChromeVox, your search key, which is just where your caps lock key would be, your search key becomes the ChromeVox key. So it would be used just like caps lock or insert would be with these other screen readers on Windows. If I was using a Windows keyboard connected to a Chrome, or if I'm remoted into a Chromebook with my computer, which is Windows, then my Windows key becomes that search key. I just have an image here of the Chrome keyboard. So if you don't have access to one, but your student has a Chrome keyboard, you could refer back to this. There is some visual descriptions too that you could find online if you want to just have the layout of where some of those keys are. But the function keys aren't labeled F1, F2, F3, but just to the right of escape, I have a back button, forward button, refresh. There's to resize the window, the display, brightness up or down, which is F6, F7, my volume controls, and then over to the right is a power button. So starting and exiting ChromeVox is very simple. It's going to be a Control Alt with the letter Z. So Control and Alt are both modifier keys. So I hold those down and I tap the letter Z. That will toggle ChromeVox on or off. Cool tip, if you're using any of the G Suite features, which are accessible on most operating systems, if you're using Windows or Mac, but if you're using a Windows computer with a different screen reader, Control Alt Z will actually toggle screen reader accessibility screen reader mode on or off. So if you're using JAWS or NVDA on a Windows computer and you are focused in Docs or any of their G Suite applications, not Gmail or Calendar, but one of the productivity applications, it will enable that accessibility menu, and it will also make it where you could do quick letters just to jump around. That's a whole several sessions in and of itself, but it works great as long as the settings are adjusted properly for the screen reader as well. So for Chrome operating system, the search key is to the left of the letter A. And to turn, because there's no caps lock key on a Chrome, even if you're not using Chromebox, it's still a search key. To turn caps lock on, you would hold down search and tap the Alt key. And search is your Chromebox key. And you could also turn a sticky mode. Now they do have sticky keys on Chrome just as well as other operating systems, but there's a specific sticky mode where you could hit the Chromebox key, the search key twice while Chromebox is on, and it locks it. So that way, instead of holding down search and hitting right or left, you could just simply hit right or left if that sticky mode is on. Also, a lot of the commands require you to hold down that Chromebox key and hit letters, like to navigate between headings or links on web pages. So if you have that sticky mode on, it just lets you make it more like NBA or JAWS, where you would just be using the letters by themselves. This is just an image of Chrome OS since I'm not connected to a Chromebook right now. So the taskbar at the bottom looks a little different, kind of looks similar to Windows Computer, but on the left there's a circle, that's my launcher button. To the right of that is what's called the shelf instead of quick launch on Windows. And then to the right of that, instead of the notification area, it's called the status tray. So the launcher in Chrome, and I know we have an hour for this session, so I'm going to skip over some of this just because this is some additional information hopefully that will help you get through, but I know we're going to need to get to the raffle so we could get to the next session by 11. I have a link here for information on Chromebox. I skipped over some of those links for the specifics for getting to those areas, but just quickly so you know, the launcher is Alt-Shift-L. The status tray is Alt-Shift-S. And then from there, I could quickly get to all of the major areas of Chrome. Orca would be for anyone using Linux distros. I know that's not as popular. That doesn't tend to be as popular in the school systems, but that is another option. Some Linux distros will come with their own built-in accessibility features. So they may have their own screen reader or magnification. It's usually built off of Orca if there's a screen reader. Take control. If you need to just temporarily stop the speech, just remember the control key is there. It doesn't turn off the speech. It just temporarily stops what it's saying. So you would need to know the specific command to get it to repeat or read out loud what you wanted it to read. And then there's some information here about iOS accessibility. I have a link for iOS accessibility where you can learn more about VoiceOver, Zoom, Magnifier, and many other accessibility features. For Android accessibility, there's a link here for to learn more about that. TalkBack would be on most Androids, but if you have a Samsung device, again, it's voice assistant. Magnification, and there are some different gestures and differences to how that works. It would be voice view if you're using a Kindle device, which also works well, but there are some differences. They also have magnification gestures and other built-in accessibility features. And then you, of course, accessible apps, which we're going to talk about later this afternoon. We're going to have an app smackdown. That's where it makes these smart devices really shine. I have some information here on starting VoiceOver, so please feel free to refer back to that. You could also set up a triple click on the home button, or if you have a newer iPhone X or newer, if you have a side button, you could set that to hit that 3 times to turn VoiceOver on or off. You could also use Siri to turn VoiceOver on or off. And of course, iOS also has their built-in Zoom, so if you want to learn more about that, I have some detailed information. And don't forget, on iOS, you also have the magnifier, which is like an external magnifier, like a CCTV. You have that in the palm of your hands if you have iPad, iPod Touch, or iPhone. So that's another feature that you could turn on, and there's some details on how to use that. With Android magnification, I have some additional information on how to use that. There's a link and some tips for you. And then for TalkBack, just have a caution, because on some devices, even though I could use my volume up and volume down to turn TalkBack on or off, just press and hold those down. But on some devices, that doesn't work as well, or there may be another shortcut. It's just not all Android devices are created as equally, which is where I think Android gets a bad rap. Android is an excellent option, but you have to make sure you get the right Android device for that student so that they could learn to use the features and that those features will work correctly. So there's just some additional information in here for using TalkBack. Feel free to go through. I have some information on some basic gestures that you could use to navigate. And finally, there was a question about Dolphin Guide Connect. So I added this. These are not built in. These are third-party options, but CDesk Community Edition is free. I have a link here for adaptivevoice.com where you could explore that. And that's, when I say menu-driven, these are both Windows-based, Dolphin Guide Connect and CDesk, but they have menus and very easy to use interface to do basic functions like word processing, email, some internet browsing, and some other features. Both of these have OCR options for optical character recognition and some other features. There's a link here if you want to watch a video for basic overview of Dolphin Guide Connect. It's a short 1-minute video. And then Adaptive Voice, if you go there, you could watch, I think the first introduction video is about 15 minutes. So it'll give you an overview and you could see how that works. Also, MarvelSoft has a program called Talking Toolbox. So you may want to explore that.
Hooray! Way to go,
Okay.
Rachel.
I know I zipped through some of those last slides. I wanted to make sure you had it, so I know it's a lot of information, but please feel free to use this as a reference to refer back to if you need to use any of these tools.
Awesome. Wow. Yes. Lots of good information. Definitely go back, watch it, go through the PowerPoint, click on the links. And I just wanted to say too that we have, I do have introductory videos using iOS, using Zoom, and using VoiceOver. So you can find those archived on the FIMC website under webinars. So you can refer back to those if you want to sit down, play, pause, and then play with your device. You can do that as well to be familiar with iOS accessibility. What was I just going to say? Oh, Benjamin Bosley. Hello, Benjamin. Has a good question. This is related to Windows. Do you know if Google Remote Desktop allows the person who is remotely accessing the computer to view the screen with enhancements turned on so that it appears different from when enhancements are on versus when they are off? I was using...
Hold on one second. I'm looking at this question.
Oh, good.
Okay. Google Remote Desktop allows the person who's remotely accessing the computer. Okay, so is the computer a Chrome? Is it a Chromebook? Can we may need to bring some of the questions over just for time.
Sure
I don't know if that's possible because we have 3 minutes and I know you're going to need to get to that.
I'm going to save. I saved the chat.
So you could use Chrome to access the Chrome browser. I don't believe, and I could be wrong, Ben, I don't believe it will go outside of the Chrome browser. If you try it and it does work, please send me an email and let me know. But if you were connected to a Chrome computer, absolutely, you could connect and see all screens. I think it's limited to the Chrome browser, but I'm curious if you do try that, if it does work outside of that.
Okay, excellent. All right, yes, the handouts are on our website. Liz posted a link, so be sure to download them there.
Yeah, there's a question about Guide Connect. Has it improved the ability to browse the web? I will, Andrea, if I'm going to copy that, yes. I make sure we could talk about that in the next question session.
Okay, so please feel free to join us at the water cooler. We're going to answer some of these questions and more. Some people have been entering questions into our form, so thank you for that. Let's get on to our raffle. So you have a break, Rachel. I'm going to ask the audience. So Beth McLean, I think you're still here. Actually, Jennifer Highland, I see you, and Kimberly. Okay, both of you. Oh, Sherry, what are our numbers that they can choose between? Can't hear you. Oh no. Can you type in the chat box how many?
I think it was 147.
You can register, Marcy, for the water cooler still. And
I'll post it.
Thank you. 1 to 141. So Jennifer Highland, Beth McLean, give me a number between 1 through 141. Okay, Jennifer Highland says 44. Who's our winner, Sherry? $44 and 128. Virginia Pollard. Are you still here, Virginia? Yes, you are. Sweet. Closing code. I'm going to get that for you while Sherry is getting number 128. And Sherry Pickles, said number 57. So we'll take that as our third number, and those will be our winners. And the closing code is ChromeVox. ChromeVox. Typing in the chat box. ChromeVox. V is in Victor. Opening code, you guys are going to have to watch the recording, please. So Virginia Pollard was our winner number 1. Phyllis Stratnall, are you here, Phyllis? I don't see Phyllis. So who's one down from Phyllis? Oh, Kim, you won. Beth, you won too. That's awesome. So Beth, you're a winner. And then we just need one more. Pick one down from Phyllis. She's not here. And I'm going to have to run and start the next session. Thank you all and see you by the water cooler. Martha Berman. Sorry. Martha's not here. Sherry, I'll let you pick. All right, I'm going to go see you guys at the water cooler. Thank you.
I'll see you in just a minute.
Sounds good.
Okay, I just posted the registration information for the water cooler, so we could definitely address any of those questions. Harriet, Chromebox or Vox? So there's two different things. Chromebox is actually a computer that's a Chrome operating system computer. That's a little box that you can connect peripherals to, and ChromeVox is the screen reader. So two different things. The rest of the questions we could absolutely address in the next session. So I just posted that registration. If you haven't registered, please do so, and I hope to see you there.